Believe it or not, the Blue Jackets power play was actually better this year than it was last year. The penalty kill, that's another story, however. We're going to talk about it on today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Now, yesterday or 5 minutes ago, as of the time of recording this, we talked about where the Blue Jackets improved last season, and the answer was basically everywhere. But what we didn't get a chance to get into is the special teams. So we're going to talk about that today. And if we have time, I want to talk a little bit about the goaltending, but not a lot, because I feel like that's a dead horse that we haven't stopped beating for like 4 years. But I wanted to look into, because I feel like we do this every season, right? Is when will the power play return from war? When will the power play return from war? Why haven't we scored a power play in 11 games? I know a friend of the show, Gary Weinheimer, he will keep count of how many power plays it's been since the Blue Jackets have last scored, and it got all the way up to like 20 something at one point this season. Power play had very good stretches and it had very bad stretches, and that's been the same for basically forever, right? I don't remember the last time the power play was good. I keep saying that it was when Sam Gagner was on the team, but that might not even be true. That might just be revisionist history from me. But power play this year was in fact better than last year. Now, I don't want to say that it was good, because an improved power play percentage still had them 22nd in the league, I believe it is. Yeah, at 19.5%. Now, that doesn't sound great. However, last season, they were 31st in the league at 15.1%. I will say that power play efficiency is kind of it's all over the place, right? Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's very, very rare that teams have an extremely good power play all the way through, unless you're the Winnipeg Jets, which they started at, I think, 45%, and then they finished at almost 30%, which is still like an insane power play rating. But the Blue Jackets improved about 4%, 4.5%, from last year to this year, which is not nothing. And I think the thing to remember with the power play, is the Blue Jackets are one of the teams in the league that get the fewest amount. They did have the fewest amount of power play opportunities this season. They had 185 power play opportunities, which by quick math is what, 3-ish per game? Maybe I'm wrong about that. No, two and a bit. Just over 2 and a bit. Let's say 2.25 for fun. By comparison, the Ottawa Senators had 269 power play opportunities. So what's that, like almost 80 more power play opportunities in the same amount of time played, averaging about 3.5 power plays per game. So that doesn't help. And I understand that that's why they do power play percentage as a percentage, right? Because if you looked at this and you were like, oh, okay, well, the Ottawa Senators scored the most power play goals in the league, obviously, because they had the most opportunities, right? They scored 64 power play goals this season. The Blue Jackets only scored 36. So almost half as much. And in fairness to the Ottawa Senators, they had a power play percentage of 23.8. So they scored on about 1 every 4 penalties. Blue Jackets scored on about 1 every 5, give or take. But the fact that they are that's not a big difference, right? That's the thing about power play opportunities and penalty kill opportunities as well, is there's not a huge difference once you get rid of the bottom feeders, which in fairness, The Blue Jackets might count as one of them. So the lowest was 11.8, which is the Anaheim Ducks, which is just miserably bad. Like I said, the highest was the Winnipeg Jets at 28.9, then the Vegas Golden Knights at 28.3, and the Devils at 28.2. So if you take out everything over about 25%, which seems excessive in my book, and you go from the Chicago Blackhawks actually have the 7th best power play in the league this season, which is wild, and go all the way down to where the Blue Jackets are, like, the difference between that is about 6% and also 15 spaces. So half the league, essentially. Blue Jackets, yes, they're closer to the bottom of the league than the top of the league, but again, I want to stress they did improve percentage-wise, and also just like in pure numbers-wise. Last season, on 212 opportunities, they had 32 power play goals. So they actually had more opportunities by about 40-ish, if I'm doing the math right, 30-ish, and scored fewer goals. So again, improvement, right? It's not where they want it to be. I don't think anyone wants their power play to be below, like, 20% to me feels like the bar for a power play, right? You should be converting on about 1 every 5, 1 every 4 if you're feeling, special. I will say that, again, only 6 teams in the league, I believe, scored on a 25% or above power play, but 21 teams scored at a 20% or above power play. And I know that we've given the goaltending for this team a lot of stick as to why this team is not in the playoffs right now. If they'd made one more save, if they'd had one more good game, like if they'd made a save. But I think we need to give more attention to the fact that with a league average power play, so let's say, league average 16, 17, 22%. If the Blue Jackets were at 22% on their power play, again, this is going to need me to do math on the fly, but 22% of 185 is is about 40. So they would have scored only 4 more power play goals, in fairness, to get to league average. But how many games did they have 0 power play goals? How many games did they lose by a goal? Like, again, if they had gotten a power play goal in 4 games, or if they've gotten, 2 power play goals in 2 games, genuinely, those 4 power play goals might be the difference between the Blue Jackets making the playoffs at 89 points or not making the playoffs, And that stings. Like, that's, again, it's frustrating because they got so close, right? And if they literally, 1 more win or 2 more overtime losses, and they'd be in the playoffs, right? That's how close it was. It's hard to think that those 4 power play goals would not have made a difference in the standings. Now, again, I do want to stress the power play improved. I know that it doesn't seem like that because myself and everyone else that watched this team spent the entire season bemoaning how bad the power play was, right? I do think it was better. There's a couple of reasons for that. I think Sean Monahan helped a lot because it turns out that having someone who can win faceoffs on your team is a good thing. Who could possibly have seen this coming, right? And Sean Monahan is just a really good, like, I was going to say extra guy on the power play, but he's not an extra guy necessarily. But, like, you look at your power play guys and you're like, okay, well, Kromachenko's the guy that you get the puck to, right? Sean Monahan gets the puck to Kromachenko. And they didn't have that for a big chunk of the season. There was parts of the season where the power play looked really good. I think like halfway through the season, the power play was top 10 in the league or something. And we were like, what's going on? Why is this happening? And then it was just absolutely miserable to finish the season. Now, I'm not going to say that correlated with Sean Monahan going down by injury, but I do know that the power play was at like 25% when he was in the lineup and like 4% when he was out of the lineup. So easy to point to Sean Monahan as a big reason for the power play improving. Having him, again, knock on wood, healthy all season next season should do wonders. Should do a lot of things for the power play. And also, frankly, penalty kill. as well. The penalty kill, I thought, and we'll talk about this in detail in a second. I thought the penalty kill had improved. I was, in fact, incorrect. So we'll talk about what happened with the penalty kill in just a second here at Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. They are your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app, it is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on, a little treat for doing a good job at my actual job. And I was like, oh, I do this every day. Oops. Now I budget smarter and I save more thanks to Monarch. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. You don't have to open your banking app and then your budgeting app and then a spreadsheet and then back to your banking app. It's all on Monarch. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for 50% off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's talk about the penalty kill. And I know that we don't want to do this, but the rules say that we have to. So we are going to. Now, the special teams were dire all season long, right? Like, again, there were flashes of good in both of them, but for the most part, the special teams were bad. Power play improved. Penalty kill, technically, by the letter of numbers, the penalty kill improved. The Blue Jackets this season was at 77% on the penalty kill, which is good for 22nd in the league. Last season, the Blue Jackets were, once I find it, the Blue Jackets were 26th in the league at 76.3%. Now, again, margin for error, very, very small. That, 0.7% accounted for 4 places. So again, if the Blue Jackets had a 77% success rate last season, they would have been 22nd as well. So like, it hasn't changed that much, but that tiny improvement does not really, in my mind, count for much, right? I will say that the Blue Jackets are one of the teams that take the fewest penalties. They are, I believe, they were top 10 for a minute. I believe they finished the season 12th. They were shorthanded 217 times. Vegas Golden Knights, least penalized team in the league. They were shorthanded 169 times. Most penalized team, the Montreal Canadiens, at 257 times. Now, in that 217 times the Blue Jackets were shorthanded, they allowed 50 power play goals. So, despite the fact that they were on par. What were they at? Like 180 times. They were at like 185, I think, times on the power play, and they scored 35. They were 217 times on the penalty kill. They allowed 50. It's about average, right? Like they're 77% on the penalty kill, 19% on the power play, which, oh god, math, I think comes out to 98%. So definitely on the less good side, and it's not quite like that's not quite how it works, but to be a good team, in my opinion anyway, you have to have your special teams have to be over 100%, right? So let's take a look at, for example, the New Jersey Devils, who had the fourth best power play in the league this season, I believe. They had an 82.7% success rate on penalty kill. On power play, they were at 28%. So 28 plus 82 is 110-ish, I believe. That's what they want, right? You want your special teams to be over 100%. The Blue Jackets are not there yet. They might get there. Again, I think Sean Monahan was a big answer for why the power play improved. I think also coaching helped. I don't remember off the top of my head like what the power play units looked like last season, but if they were anything like the 5-on-5 units, my guess is the Blue Jackets spent a lot of time trying to figure out who they were playing with as opposed to what they were actually doing on the power play or the penalty kill. I think also putting they had more options on the penalty kill this year, which I thought was really interesting. Like, who did we see on the penalty kill this year? Cole Sillinger got penalty kill time. Adam Fantilli got penalty kill time. Kent Johnson got penalty kill time. Who else got penalty kill time? Like, those were the big ones. Matthew Olivier got a bunch of penalty kill time, which I was surprised by. Like, were they like good on the penalty kill? That's another story. But I think having more options on the penalty kill helps. I think not having Erica Branson on the penalty kill all of the time helps. Sorry to Erica Branson. Once he was back, he was, right back where he started. He played 16 games this season and had 37 minutes of penalty kill time, which is about 2 minutes a game, which seems like a lot for Erica Branson, but whatever. They adapted, they improved, just not enough, right? And I think again, it goes back to, I think goaltending was a problem on the penalty kill. I think you want your team to get a save sometimes, right? And Blue Jackets did really well in terms of creating offense on the penalty kill, which is not something that I was expecting. They ended up finishing, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, tied for 5th in the league in shorthanded goals. The New York Rangers had 18 shorthanded goals this season, which is insane. The Blue Jackets had 9 shorthanded goals, but the fun thing is that I believe all 9 were scored by a different player. I don't believe anyone had more than So, shorthanded goal scorers this season: Mathieu Olivier, Zach Werenski, Cole Sillinger, Adam Fantilli, Justin Danforth, Mikhail Pucha, Ken Johnson, Boone Jenner, Ivan Provorov. Extremely, extremely funny. There's another great name for the penalty kill. Mikhail Pucha. Obviously, only played about half the season with the Blue Jackets, but did a pretty good job on the penalty kill. So that, I think, is why it looked better. I think is that the systems looked better. I don't know what the save percentage on I don't know what the save percentage was for the Blue Jackets in terms of penalty kill, but I bet I could try to find out. The Blue Jackets were genuinely, they felt better. Blue Jackets had an 85%, 856 save percentage on shots on goal on the penalty kill this season. Last season, they had an 860. So that is an improvement. It's still not great. Like last season, they were the 11th worst team. This season, a little bit of improvement. They were the 18th worst team on the penalty kill. So, again, improvement. I will say that the save percentage for the best team for save percentage during the penalty kill this season was the Vancouver Canucks with an 883. So they were not miles away from where they needed to be or top of the league, but I still think they needed to be better, right? And again, the goaltending, I think, needs to be better, but the structures looked better. And I think, again, that's a big reason why I think the power play improved and why the penalty kill improved. And I think that's why the team as a whole improved. And I wanted to talk about this yesterday. Didn't get a chance because I ran out of time. The Blue Jackets this season showed some inconsistency in their on-ice play, but I think that they were given Dean Everson, I thought, was a really stabilizing effect on this team. In a way that Pascal Vincent and Brad Larson just were not. So if I can pull up. I'm on moneypuck.com for all of my stats needs. For people who are interested. This season, the leading line for the Blue Jackets in terms of how many minutes they played was Dmitry Voronkov, Adam Fantilli, Kirill Marchenko. They played 370 minutes together. Second place, Voronkov, Monahan, Marchenko. Now, again, quick math there suggests that Voronkov and Marchenko played almost 600 minutes together, which is wild. But that's what you want, right? Third place, Aston Reese, Danforth, Olivier, 284 minutes. It drops down after that to Chinikov, Monahan, Marchenko, which was kind of when, again, they were figuring things out. But it looks like for a lot of the season, they had, some solid lines. They had to figure out the second line a lot because they couldn't figure out who to play with Fantilli. But the difference here is last season, the leading line for the Blue Jackets was Chinikov, Voronkov, Marchenko. Second, Gaudreau, Jenner, Roslovic. Third, Texier, Sillinger, Marchenko. And the leading ice time was 262 minutes, which I believe was, if I go to all teams, about a quarter of the top line. Now, for the Blue Jackets this season, what did I say? 370 minutes? The top line this season was Kyle Carter, Mark Scheifele, Gabe Velarde, who played 907 minutes together, which is kind of insane. But Voronkov, Fantilli, Marchenko played the 22nd most minutes together of any team in of any line on any team, which is good. Your top line should be the one that's playing the most ice time, right? Frequently last season, the most consistent line would have been the Olivier Robinson Kuraly line, which was just absolutely god awful. But Dan Everson has come in, and I think we're seeing consistency, we're seeing stability, and I think the team has started to reward him for that, right? And I think is a big reason why the 5-on-5 play was so improved, because it turns out that when you let guys just play, you get results, right? Penalty kill, the power play, they'll come in time. I think, again, having Sean Monahan healthy helps there. But I'm going to be really interested to see what the power play, what the penalty kill looks like next season, because I imagine the 5-on-5 play, will probably be about the same, maybe a little bit better defensively if they can, rehaul the defense, which I don't know how they're going to rehaul the defense if they want to keep both Provorov and Fabro, because then you're just rolling back last year's defense. Anyway, that's not this episode. That's a different episode. But I expect the special teams to be a big focus this summer, because if this team had been middle of the pack on either of those, they'd probably be in the playoffs right now, right? I want to talk a little bit more about the goaltending, just to kind of finish off. I talked about it a little bit there, and we're not going to get into, Elvis versus Tarasov versus Greaves versus whoever, just the team goaltending as a whole. And I want to talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about FanDuel, because the NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel has all of the odds, and they're giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. If you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet and win, you're going to get $250 in bonus bets, and you can spend that $250 on whatever you want, whether it's picking the money line, whether it's picking 3-pointers, steals, assists, all kinds of player props. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player or your favorite team. And after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Once again, join FanDuel, go to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you get $250 in bonus bets. Just go pick the heaviest favorite you can. Doesn't matter what it is. Just find the heaviest favorite, put $5 on it, and if/when it comes through, $250 to spend on whatever you want. That is FanDuel.com. Claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's finish off real quick with goaltending, because here's the thing. The Blue Jackets looked like they improved in terms of goaltending this season. I don't know if they did really, right? Okay. And this is what's really interesting is, were the Blue Jackets better defensively, or was the goaltending better, right? Because fact of the matter is they allowed, I think, 30-ish goals fewer than last season, give or take. I think 33 was the final number. Were they better than they were last season in goal? Were they better at defense? A little bit of both. I think probably a little bit of both. But the Blue Jackets, in terms of save percentage this season, were their team average, which again, we're not going into Elvis versus Tarasov versus whoever, was a 908 save percentage on just on pure shots on goal, which was 19th in the league. Now, last season, this is all 5-on-5, by the way. Last season, they were 18th in the league with a 911 save percentage on shots on goal. So just, again, pure numbers, worse. If you go to all situations and put the non-special teams in, last season, the Blue Jackets were 22nd with an 894 save percentage in all situations. This season, Blue Jackets actually got worse as well at an 891 at all situations save percentage. Again, Blue Jackets, if they were middle of the pack. Now, in fairness, they were pretty close to middle of the pack here. I think league average goaltending was at a 900 this season, which is wild. That's, again, because all situations, only 10 teams had a 900 save percentage or above. So if the Blue Jackets had a 900 save percentage in total, they would have had the 10th or 11th best goaltending in the league. So I'm going to go ahead and say, again, let's go middle of the pack. It was about an 896. 896, 893. That was the 15th and 16th best teams in the league. 17th was an 891. Blue Jackets were, in fact, sitting at an 891 save percentage. So they were pretty close to middle of the pack, depending on, obviously, how things are weighted, etc., etc. But they sure were frustrating at times in terms of goaltending. And again, going into the team goalies, obviously some performed better than others, let's say. Of the 3 goalies used this season, Jet Greaves saved 14.5 goals more than expected. Daniil Tarasov saved 4.5 less than expected, and Elvis saved 8 goals less than expected. So Elvis allowed 168 goals, and he was only supposed to allow 160. Daniil Tarasov allowed 65, was only supposed to allow 60, and Jet allowed 21 when he was supposed to allow 36.5. So again, a much smaller sample size for Jet than for the other two, but the goaltending needs to be better, right? And I think you can look at this and you can say, well, they should have called Jet up sooner. Hindsight is 2020. There is no reason to expect that Jet Greaves would have performed like this all season, right? I think Jet performed excellently, but I think the team stepped up in front of him as well. And I think that for me is the big thing about the goaltending, right? Is because on paper, the goaltending looks worse. Obviously, they had more wins this season. Wins are not a goaltending stat. The Blue Jackets, I believe, allowed fewer goals. Allowed fewer shots, just kind of in general, right? I'm just looking up what their shots per game were. Last season, the Blue Jackets allowed 34.5 shots per game, which was the second worst in the NHL. Only the Sharks were worse, which is not good company to be in. This season, they allowed 29.9. So what's that? An average of 4 shots, give or take. 4.5 shots a game fewer. Now, that was still the 5th worst in the league. The only teams that allowed more shots, the Ducks, the Sharks, the Blackhawks, the Penguins. The Rangers allowed the exact same number of shots, 29.9. But then, and again, margin for error, right? The stingiest team in the league, the Carolina Hurricanes, only allowed 24.9. So on average, 5 shots a game, which is about what the Blue Jackets improved by. So if Blue Jackets improve by that again, then they'll be great. But again, if you go to middle of the road, if the Blue Jackets allowed maybe a couple of shots fewer per game, they'd be in a different position. But I think what we're seeing here is the defense improved, and that made the goaltending look a lot better, which is kind of the opposite of what I thought. Which is why I think it's always fun to dive into these kind of stats, right? And see, and I am typically a person that looks at stats more than the eye test, just because I think that smarter people than me have spent a lot of time with, trends and likelinesses and probabilities, and I understand just enough to make me dangerous, right? But I also think that stats on their own are not the be all and end all, right? You have to use eye test and you have to use the stats, and whether that's a case of wanting to confirm, like if you watch something in a game and you're like, oh, okay, that looks good, am I correct in this? And then you go and you look at the stats. I think that's a really useful way. Or using the stats to explain something that you can't understand via the eye test, right? So, like, why does X player get all the ice time when he doesn't score a lot of goals, right? And then you go and you look and you're like, oh, okay, it's because he's basically creating double the amount of offense of everyone else on his team, right? I think stats are really good at explaining what the eye test misses. And then on the flip side, I think using stats and then using stats and then using the eye test in the other direction, I think can also be really useful, because you can go back and you're like, oh, okay, now I see. Yeah, he does do this. He does do that. Now I understand, right? So I think they really kind of go hand in hand. But I am interested to see that the eye test and the stats, for me anyway, were basically in direct competition in terms of the goaltending, because I did genuinely think that the goaltending was better and kind of masking some flaws on defense. And now I'm like, man, maybe the defense was masking some flaws on goaltending in a way that we hadn't even really realized until right now. So that to me is that, like, again, special teams obviously need to improve. I think they will improve with the people that they have in the room now, right? I think a lot of special teams is about deployment and about coaching as opposed to like actual players. Goaltending, I don't know that you're going to improve the goaltending with the goalies that you have in the room right now. And people kind of got all kind of worked up about an article in, I think, the Columbus Dispatch it was, basically saying that Don Waddell is not considering buyout and is thinking about running back the same goaltending. And then you go in and you're like, well, that's not what he said, actually. And like, I know that we're only a year, like less than a year into the Don Waddell experience here here in Columbus. But in my experience, he's not the guy. He's not a guy to sit there and be like, yeah, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Like, he's not like Lou Lamoriello levels of keep it close to his chest. But I do find it interesting that as soon as Kekalainen was not the GM anymore, there were way fewer insider notes on what the Blue Jackets are doing. And whether that's that Jarmo Kekalainen talked a lot more, or whether it's that Don Waddell keeps things close to his chest, I don't know. But Don Waddell is not going to sit here and tell the media his entire plans, because if he shows his hand to the media, then every other team will be like, they are desperate for goaltending. We will charge them $1 billion for this league average goaltender, So if he considered, I think the league probably knows that Columbus wants to improve their goaltending, but you don't have to say it out loud, right? At least pretend like you don't, And I think you've got to pretend as well in the instance that you can't improve your goaltending and you are forced to go into the season next year with Elvis on your team still, if you can't move him, then it makes sense to kind of not rock the boat there, right? If you sit there in your end of season presser and like, yeah, Elvis is terrible, we definitely want to move on from him, and then you can't do that, it doesn't feel super great in terms of morale. And also just like look at what happened in Vancouver, right? Is that organization spent basically the entire season calling out all of their star players, and now all of their star players are unhappy and want to go somewhere else. So I'm okay with Don Waddell keeping his cards close to the chest. I will be interested to see, what happens, who goes where, like what improves, what doesn't. But I'm willing to give him benefit of the doubt. I do think that you have to improve the goaltending if you want this team to get anywhere. But I do think the special teams will improve by themselves, just in terms of, again, just practice, right? I think they have all the right pieces. I think, again, changing the goaltending will definitely help on special teams as well. But for the most part, and I said this earlier, not in this episode, in yesterday's episode, which, you know, I'm recording these back to back, just as a heads up, in case you hadn't realized. This team improved basically everywhere, but it showed them where they need to work on, right? So you're like, okay, the offense has improved, the power play improved a little bit, it's on the right track. Goaltending got worse. Defense improved, but not enough. Penalty kill, kind of stagnant. These are things that we can focus on over the summer, you know? And I know that they want to add a top 6 winger. I'm not against that. It does feel like that is less of a priority right now than goaltending. But it also feels easier to, in theory anyway, easier to improve your top 6 than to improve your goaltending, just because there are more wingers out there than there are goalies. So we'll see. That's all I've got for today. Tomorrow, I think what we're going to talk about is we'll talk about how they can improve these things, right? So we've talked about what improved, we've talked about why they improved. Let's talk about how the things that didn't improve can improve. Should be a fun way to end this little series, fake series, quote unquote, that I accidentally started yesterday's episode. I've been Jake Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Bluejacket. If you have comments, questions, criticism, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Like I said, tomorrow we're going to talk about how this team can continue to improve. But until then, make sure you stay locked on.